Welcome to the Nora Foundation Wednesday night session. I'm Reverend Hanny Freiwat, and this is my first solo session this year. So for those of you who weren't with us last week, Happy New Year. And this is very exciting time for us. Dr. Erico has been working on some short videos that we'll be releasing daily, maybe weekly, but there'll be about 5-minute videos that address a topic. And we are hoping to also release them on not just YouTube, but some of the other platforms, Instagram and TikTok. So we've been working on this for a while, and I think we finally have the Spirit said, okay, 2026 is the time to do it, so we're doing it. Dr. Eric will be with you next week as well. So with that said, I'll go ahead and open with the Lord's Prayer in the Aramaic tongue, the way Jesus spoke it over 2,000 years ago. عود وشميا نتقداش شماخ تأثي ملكوتاخ نهوي صبيانخ إكند وشميا أبر حولا لحمة سنكانا يومنا واشوقلان حوبين إكند أبحنان شوقن لحيوين ولا تعلن لأنسيونا إلا بصا من بيشة مثول ديلاخي ملكوثة حي لو تشبحتا العالم عالمين Amen. Well, the thing that was on my mind all day today, and it's been on my mind for a while, is the idea of God. I almost never talk about it, and it's something that one of the reasons I don't talk about it is because it's such a hard concept to try to articulate, the idea of God. Jesus, I just did the Lord's Prayer, and he used something straight from his culture of referring to the beloved, the Spirit that governs everything, as the Father. And I know in today's culture, and I've talked about this before, sometimes the word Father can be a trigger word for people who have had both good and bad trigger word. And then it has implications as well, because we think of father, we think of male. And growing up in the Middle East, the idea of God being a person is it's not even an option. But that said, people, to explain God's behavior, end up attributing a lot of human qualities to him. In Islam, God has 99 names that describe qualities of him. He's the merciful. He is the just one. So there are like literally 99 qualities that are attributed to God, which cover almost every behavior, including being very powerful and sometimes punishing, and so there are so many of these things. Jesus took a simpler path to describing God by modeling him. See, I used him. So modeling Alaha as a loving presence in our life, similar to a good dad. And Jesus was very specific in some of his parables, saying, would a father give a hungry son a stone instead of bread? Would a father do so? So he constantly described God as, God takes care of Allah takes care of the birds in the sky. They don't worry. They find shelter. They find food. They find water when they need it. Look at the flowers. Allah gives the flowers all these beautiful colors that makes them, shine. And of course, we know nature gives them, the bees come follow those flowers, and we get stuff from that. We get joy looking at the flowers. And Jesus was, careful, because in in the Hebrew Bible, in the Torah, God evolves. So when we open the book of Genesis and the relationship between the book of Genesis, just the poem in the first chapter about creation and so forth, God is just joyfully creating everything, and he sees that, or God sees it. So every time I say he, because of my cultural influence and maybe some of my English influence, being in the West for so long. So Allah just creates, and God's things. So even the words that are used to describe Allah's actions, or Elohim, because we're talking about the ancient Hebrew God, was creating all these things and seeing the goodness in them and seeing how they can work together, the sun and the moon and the earth and humanity and all the animals and all the goodness that's there, and male and female. Okay, so even in this story, and there is no separation between male and female. God's in the image and likeness of Elohim. So the qualities that we have as we get created come from this creator, come from this creative action that brings the whole universe together in rhythm, in harmony, in a way that can collaborate and to coexist. Then you see, after that, God becomes a potter. God becomes a farmer. God becomes like a garden keeper when he's interacting with Adam and Eve. Less powerful, less universal, less spiritual, more walking around looking for these people who are doing something they're not supposed to do, eating from a tree they're not supposed to eat. So you can see how the storytellers, as they evolved God, slowly made the Elohim, the Allah, more human, behaving like human, and in a way applying cultural standards, cultural norms to the Bible, to the Torah. And now that those stories, instead of being viewed from that cultural perspective and the time they were created, they're used to control people in religion and tell them, that the woman came from man, and it's very risky. And I believe Jesus had to face those exact arguments 2,000 years ago, because the religion, he grew up in that religion, and saw how people were struggling with understanding God. Do we go pray in the temple in Jerusalem? Is that the place really God is? Because again, the evolution of God. Moses took God. See, there was no Jewish religion at the time of Adam, even at the time of Abraham and his children, and Joseph and so forth. There was no like defined religion as Judaism. They were just nomadic tribes that had a different God, and that God sometimes took very similar qualities to the pagan gods that were around him. Again, people are attributing that to God, the people of the time, the people with their thinking. So that's why I'm saying there is an evolution of God that by the time Jesus gets there, he almost hits the rewind button all the way to the beginning. He leverages that creative story and the relationship, the human relationship between God and Abraham. That relation, I mean, if you haven't read it, go read it kind of without the dogma. Read about how Abraham interacted with Allah or Elohim or the Ithya Rabba. We have so many names, and the original one is the Ithya Rabba. It's the self-sustaining presence that doesn't need, because all this creative, all this stuff that God does comes from a place where it's not like us. When we create, we're leveraging experience, heart, emotions, physicality, the mind, the memories, all the senses. So when we think of God, we want to give Alaha similar capabilities to ours. That's what we relate to. So Moses, what was so protective of God and protective of the power that Moses gets from being the one who can hear and communicate with God, that he ends up locking God in behind the curtain and forbids anybody from violating that space. And he was the only one who could go there. And then eventually he brought in his brother, became a family business. So his brother became the high priest and he could go there. And then that carried all the way through, probably to this day in some practices where people have to be from Aaron, who's the brother of Moses. They became the people who could communicate and be the high priests, etc. So you can see how the spirit that created the universe became the buddy, the pal of Abraham. Before that was the potter, the farmer, the garden keeper, and then became this tribal god with Moses. And before Moses, there was more of a tribal god. And some of them worshipped Elohim along. They would try to incorporate, because sometimes if you're praying for one God and that God is not working out for getting children or having rain or something, the neighbors had a pretty good rain God. So they went and started kind of going into those temples and practicing those things. So as you read the prophets, as you read the story of the Hebrew people and that I hate to put a label on it, because they were the people who were bringing God forward, this spiritual God forward, but they're applying their belief systems, applying their culture, applying their language. And you can see it in the prophets where there was a constant push and pull between the God of Moses, who's very structured, temple-based, punishing, requires sacrifice, and so forth. And the prophets were always trying to pull the spiritual God, the universal God, the God of goodness, who wants justice for all, who wants his children to play together nicely, not hurt each other, take care of the poor, take care of the orphans, take care of the widows. That was the constant, in every prophet you read. There is that message of like, I don't need your sacrifice. I gave you the universe. Why would you, cook an ox and claim that it's to please Elohim? That doesn't need that. So Jesus coming at the tail of this to a state of Judaism where the temple was rebuilt in Jerusalem. The temple was the center of the religion that he grew up in. Though he was far away enough in Galilee, he felt the effect of it. People still went on a pilgrimage there. They had big splits between them and the Samaritans, because the Samaritans believed in the Torah, but not in a lot of the stuff that came after the first 5 books. They took the well of Jacob, was important for them, which was very old. They chose a different mountain to worship on, because I think historically that mountain was holy, was a high place to commune with God. I think we had that kind of built into our DNA, that to reach God. You see that in Babylon before, they were not Elohim or Alaha people, but they built a big tower to reach the sky. There's always this tendency, and a lot of our religious buildings today have that nature. And go to any large city, you see the same thing. You see that, to this day, man is still trying, humanity, I guess, is still trying to reach the sky. So Jesus comes into this setting, and he's as I said before, he went to the desert. How do I talk to these people? Who do I talk to? How do I describe this awesome presence that governs everything, that wants us to live in harmony? How do I get their attention? So he drew into his culture and his culture saw a good father. It's such an honorable thing to be a good dad, that he said, that's how I can relate to that, and I can describe that. And that's why you don't see a lot of talking about God or Allah in Jesus. So, and this is something, for me, as you can tell from my language, from my cultural background, it's not easy to describe. So what is God? And the only thing I can, go to Jesus. I'm going straight to chapter 4 of the Gospel according to John, where Jesus is communicating with the Samaritan woman. And I think not too long ago I did the Samaritan woman story. But she then going to the chapter and reading straight from there. After they have a dialogue, and she feels like, okay, this guy is special. He knows something because he told her about her personal life. He could tell her things about it. So she tells him, oops, I think I hit my keyboard by mistake. So our forefathers worshipped on this mountain, and you say the place where men must worship is in Jerusalem. So she's implying, because he's Jewish from Galilee, that's his stance, and that's one of the areas where, like, this is the holy place. No, this is the holy place. We see that still to this day, and even in Christianity. I think Christianity is slowly, even modern Christianity is getting closer together. But in some of the older traditions, Christmas is on the 7th of January. No, it's on the 25th of December. No, it's so there is this mindset as if it's going to make any difference when Christmas is. So they had that. You pray there, we pray here. That that our dogma is better than your dogma. So Jesus said to her, "Woman, believe me, the time is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will they worship the Father." So he's making a prediction. And it's because of that, it's because of this mindset of conflict that these religions will not succeed in lasting, even in in staying relevant. And I see this today in Christianity. I mean, and I'm not saying that our day is any special. It was the same 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, and 1,500 years ago. You can see these cycles where religion really tries to grip us and try to tell us what's right and what's wrong. And it ends up fading, and people move away from it. And it takes a while before people get totally lost away from our spirituality, from what soothes our soul, what we really yearn for. In materialism, and I'm not saying any of the fun stuff that we like to do is bad, but often it's not balanced. So we tend to like push in one way and then start pushing all the way. And we do that across so many different philosophies and ideologies, where we think this is what it's about. I'm willing to die for it. And then you feel, oh, no, maybe it was not a complete thought. So let me switch and go to this thing. And then people just constantly are looking for this one thing to grip and hold and fight for. So Jesus, that's kind of like, so Jesus says, you worship what you do not know. So oh, sorry, did I skip? Okay, so Jerusalem, okay, you must worship in Jerusalem. Jesus said to her, woman, believe me, the time is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will they worship the Father. You see, he's still using the Father with her, which I'm sure was probably kind of like, what are you talking about, in a way? But in a way, because of the culture, she knew. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. We're talking about Allah, but we're referring to him as Awa. You worship what you do not know, but we worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. So he's still picking that we know better than you do, Samaritans. Kind of strange, but I don't want to derail this into like the authors of the Bible and how getting telling them that we have the better story is an important thing, and you're documenting this. So it's creating it's setting the ground. It's planting the seeds to try to bring the Samaritans into Christianity. That's my because Jesus was not confrontational that way. But even if we say that he did say that, but the time is coming. More importantly, and it is here. So, see, this is important. It is here. So Jesus was always about the kingdom is at hand. The kingdom is here. The time is here. He wasn't projecting this, 2000 years from now, we're going to have this, catastrophic war, and that's the time. He was always aware that in my lifetime, the kingdom is alive. And when I go, the apostles will continue to serve and continue to preach the good news that the kingdom is here. It's now. God's presence is with us here and now. So his language is important here. It's here. When the true worshipers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father also desires worshipers such as these. For God is spirit. This is where I struggle. Alaha ruha. God is spirit. So how do you take spirit and spirit in English, for me it's one of those words that can be used in many ways. But in a way we get the essence of it. But ruha, the Aramaic word itself is about, it comes from like the spirit, the essence of that we have. So Eastern people believe in that we are first spirit that then is embodied. And Jesus had that belief system because from the beginning, what did God do? He guided man and woman in the image and likeness of God. So God's spirit, but created the physical. In the Adam story, he blew. So blew the spirit and animated the clay into existence. So the same thread of God is spirit, Alaha ruha, resonates with the culture. And that's the hard part, is like so then we get lost in the father, male, female, he, she, them, as God. And I think all those things for today, for 2000 some years later, they're applicable because that's what our minds will relate to today. But sometimes getting stuck in that realm is where sometimes I struggle communicating about this beautiful presence that governs the kingdom that I want to live in and I want to bring into existence. I want to participate in doing that. So without connecting to the idea that we are spirit and Allah is spirit, we constantly and consistently will miss the target. We will always get mired in these terminologies. And unless you come at it from a spiritual culture, which unfortunately we don't have that, and it's disappearing even in a lot of the world, but some of it is still alive, is still in the essence. And I don't think we can ever, as I said, it's a part of us that does not that needs feeding, needs nurturing, needs connection. The connection between us is driven by that. That's why I think a lot of relationships fall apart. That's why a lot of even familial relationships fall apart because we are so focused on defining success in a material way. We compete. We have a lot of alignments. I mean, when Jesus grew up in Galilee, he didn't have four teams to pick from and six high schools to root for or against, and nations and flags. It was all Roman Empire, and they were hated. So that there were a few flags, and a lot of people died protecting or trying to bring those flags into existence in his time. And that was one of the risks, of course, of him being labeled the Messiah, which comes up in the next verse. So he says, "For God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth." And in truth is very powerful because it's that clear definition between right and wrong and commitment. So what Jesus is digging into here is not just that you can spiritually communicate with God. There is an essence of truth about you that needs to be present in your community, in your society, in your relationships, because our relationships with God are manifested with our relationships with one another. So he's bringing this kingdom, this tight-knit community, global community. It has no restrictions. And that's why he's spending the time speaking with the Samaritan woman. He did not dismiss her and say, no, no, you guys, I don't need to waste my time on you. I can go talk to my people. And when he sent his disciples and apostles, he opened it up. And very quickly they got that. There were some limitations in the beginning, as both Dr. Erko and I mentioned before. It's hard for these concepts to like grab a Greek person at the time of Jesus or a Roman person from Rome, because some Romans were actually Arameans and probably even Jews who had the full status of citizenship. So they could understand. So it's the cultural background is key to talk about these things. And the Samaritans were from the same culture, so they grasped those meanings. So, spirit and truth. The woman said to him, I know that the Messiah, the Mashiach, is coming. When he is come, he will teach us everything. Okay, so they had the same belief system that at some point there is going to be one who brings in the kingdom, who brings in this new age. And Jesus said to her, I am he who is speaking to you. So when you're reading Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus kind of avoids that title. Now we're moving into John, different purpose of the whole Gospel of John. Now we see Jesus both declares that the Jews have it more figured out than the Samaritans. Here he's saying, I am he, declaring himself. So those things change, are like introduced differently in the Gospel of John. But he did believe that he had the duty of being the one who actually the firstborn son of God in that, again, in a very Eastern way, talking about that I inherited the same thing that we all inherited, which is that Spirit of God. And now my role today, this is 2030 years ago, I got it, and I'm imparting to you the nature of God, the spiritual nature of God, and what we need to do to get along and bring in the presence of God. So that's what So for me, talking about this topic is difficult because that language is so limiting. Now, once you start communing with God, once you start getting the idea that I'm spirit communicating with God in spirit and in truth, okay, no agenda. That's why in the Lord's Prayer it says, Thy will be done. And I have complete faith. All my physical needs will be met. Keep me out of trouble and let your will be done. This beautiful, balanced universe that we watch. And it has violence, but beautiful violence that creates or destroys and to recreate and so forth. That's what we are a part of. So once we connect to that and then practice it with one another, because on our own, locked up in a room, we'll drive ourselves crazy trying to figure this out. But you can see it in the eyes of somebody you're helping. You can see it in the eyes of somebody you're kind to, and somebody you're thankful to, and somebody who's reaching out and helping you. Once you start connecting that Your spirit, I'm spirit. We are bringing the presence of Allah. We are bringing the kingdom to existence. We are practicing the kingdom. The world looks chaotic if we look outside of that view. And that's why I wanted to talk about this today, is because this is such a grounding way of existence, and it has a huge impact on how we continue to evolve humanity, how we continue to evolve Earth, government, economy, all these things that we created them. These economy and ideology and government models and military and borders and flags and even structures that we built, including churches. So all these things are our concepts that we manifested. That's how powerful, this spirit that we have is in creating these things. It's when these things become our God, become our belief system, become our foundation, is when we lose it. And there are a lot of people who never get exposed to anything but that. So it's so important to get grounded in spirit and in truth. It's so important that you start looking for opportunities to practice spirit and truth with one another, with your community, with anybody you come interact with. And then for us to see change in society, that we need to be that light. We need to be that spirit. Otherwise, we're it took for our time, because I don't think it lasts beyond, I'm only here another, few more years, whatever that is, 10, 15, 40, 50. I don't put a number on it, because in spirit, there is no time. In spirit, and hopefully I'll have the same energy. God bless you, Dr. Eriko, when you're speaking. You're an inspiration, because I know you're just fully powered by truth. And that's the example that we all have, is you look at the people, and a lot of the people who make it into older age, they you can start seeing them distilling more into spirit, distilling more into wisdom, into kindness. And that's, we can bring it now. It's available in the children, but then we slowly start stacking stuff on top of it. Pledge to this, pledge to that, wear this color, love that flag, believe in that border, believe in wealth. What's your 5-year plan now that you graduated? Oh, I want to help society and community. I want to volunteer. I want to be a good doctor. No, no, no. You got loans. You got status. You got a 5-year plan. You got a promotion, and then you just kind of like, oh yeah, that's the truth of me now. And we lose a lot of good energy coming out of the young people, and then eventually they get lost in the world, and we see a lot of devastation, not lack of happiness, sadness, people spending day and night in gaming rooms and in basements, in dark rooms. And we need to get out. We need to kind of drag we have the duty. You listening to me, you listening to Dr. Eriko, you being a part of the Nohra Foundation movement, the movement of Jesus, really. We're not isolated. That thread is through all of us, that we need to lift up and use our time here to bring that spiritual presence into existence. So thank you so much for joining me tonight. I do have a few questions. If anything inspired you and you want to share or ask about, please feel free. But I'll start from the top here. I have been told that the New Testament scripture were not written by the disciples. Do we have proof of who wrote them? Unfortunately, no. The simple answer is no. There isn't the Eastern spiritual writing. I'm going to make a general statement. That first, the author is not important. So that's, the fact that we label them with the name of an author, it is. Again, we're talking about spiritual concepts. Who cares if it's John or Luke or Mark and a lot of them were labeled with a name, but if you read that carefully, they were actually coming from a specific perspective of a different person. So the actual author, the actual the person who dictated and how scribes and versions of these writings came together. There isn't an official copy somewhere with published year one by John, in this by this publication. ISBN number does not exist. Even in Islam, because Islam, which is and sometimes I use Islam because it has a spiritual side to it, and it has a lot of the culture, and it's a newer religion, so it's documented much better than the Hebrew story and the Jesus story. They burn as soon as the Bible is soiled, as soon as the Quran is soiled, with a dot, with a dash, with a piece of dirt, with anything, they copy it and then they burn it before it becomes a questionable document. So even in Islam, you can't go very far back in catching, like it's only what's the religion's about 1400, 1500 year old religion. So and they did capture it early on, but even in Islam, there was an effort. The fourth ruler after the Prophet Muhammad died, third or yeah, the third ruler after the Prophet Muhammad died, had to put an effort together because a lot of the Quran was captured orally. So they had people who memorized the Quran or big sections of the Quran. And because they were expanding, and these men, mainly men, were carrying the story, going on battles and going into Syria and Iraq and Egypt and so forth, spreading the word of Islam. Some of them were dying. And so there was like an effort by the whole movement to bring them back and capture the Quran, and then creating an authoritative copy that then could be copied over and over again. And from that point on, I don't think we have that original copy. So from that point on, every time a copy got soiled, it got copied and then it got burned. So, and that practice is alive to this day. The Aramaic Bible, it's the same exact story. And if somebody would have kept it, they would have almost been sinning, because then they're risking. I mean, my Bible, if I showed you any of my pages, I have writings and so forth. Thank goodness it's in English and I'm marking things with a red pencil. But sometimes what happened is, even like the little writings on the side, the next person who copied it is like, oh, wow, brilliant observation by that person who owned that Bible. And slowly that came in, and a scribal note made it into the main text. That's why we see a lot of things, a lot of parables that I've done before, where we're like, I don't think Jesus would have ended the parable that way. Jesus ended most of his parables with like an open thought for you to kind of let it fester in you the way you perceive it. So do we know? Do we have proof? Absolutely not. Anybody who tells you otherwise, unless we, in the future run into like some cache of Bibles hidden and underground or in some cave somewhere, kind of like what happened with the Nag Hammadi or the Dead Sea Scrolls. But even those were copies of copies of copies of copies, and they were preserved for a specific reason. And today, as we pull them out, for the most part, they match what we expect to see. So sorry for the very long answer, but I get a lot of questions about, like, somebody wants, and I don't know which one was first, Mark or Matthew or Luke. We have theories about them. I have a theory about it that I buy into, that probably Matthew being very first, being when they gathered the Bible together, they put it in front, and it's very Jewish in its way it's written. It probably was ahead of Mark. But if you go to Harvard or Oxford or a lot of the scholars there, they'll tell you no, Mark was it, and it was built on something called the Q, which was the source document. And I would say, if you take anything out of my talk today, your spirit, you're beautiful, you're in the image of likeness of Alaha. Go and live from that space. Who cares how you got there? Who cares which book you read, which version, and this is for everybody. I'm not picking on the person who asked the question, because that, and I know, there is a point where I think I can pull two or three or four books from this main shelf that I usually reach to, talking about specifically. Uh, here is one of them. One of the first books I bought when I started studying with Dr. Erickel called, it's very hard to see because it's in gold, but it's the synoptic problem, kind of like which book came first. And scholar, I mean, think about this. Some PhD was one on this, and ultimately, when you read all of it, it's kind of theories, and what I'm telling you is like we don't really know. Um, okay, next question. In Matthew 5:18, where Jesus refers to heaven and earth passing away, would he be referring to the temple where heaven and earth met? If not, why don't we continue to keep the feasts, food laws, etc.? So it's very similar to what he tells the Samaritan woman in that all these traditions, he didn't speak, against them because they were cultural. So the feasts, the food, he celebrated right before he was crucified, the Pesach feast. So, he did not condemn these things. It's part of the culture. It's part of what we do. It's part of our reminder of our spirituality. But he did not like temples because they are restrictive. So, and most of the prophets spoke the same way. So it's not like an original idea of Jesus to say the temple will be destroyed. But because it's symbolic, he knew that their rebellion and their refusal to conform is going to make the powerful nations, and it happened multiple times in their history, where powerful nations came, and by destroying the temple, you're basically scattering the people who lived and existed around the temple. You destroyed the center of the thing. You see it in today's war. Why is Russia so focused on Kiev and their constant bombardment? Because if you bring Kiev down, if you make the people of the center of the nation run away and afraid and scared and so forth, then you're destroying the essence of that identity. So Jesus saw that, and he did see though that if with all the destruction, you still have the kingdom of heaven in existence, in action. Because during those times, people were kind to each other. People tried to help each other. People who got broken and lost family members and became the mourners, Jesus picked them up. He said, "Blessed are the mourners. Blessed are the ones who seek justice. Blessed are the ones who are meek." Because the meek were like, watching the armies going back and forth and bombing this and chasing that. And sometimes they got hit with unfortunate, circumstances, but because they were like, whatever. And Jesus wasn't afraid of death. That sometimes motivates us to do things, that fear of death. So he wasn't afraid of death. So he could speak freely. He could, in truth. Okay, so he was always, when they questioned that about him, it's like, why would I trick you? Why would I do something like that? Watch for the people who do. So people who preach afterlife, death, fear, hell, okay, all those people are not worshiping God in Ruha, Alaha, in spirit and in truth. So it's, and I think Jesus was constant in that throughout his ministry. Regarding tonight's talk, what does it mean to worship in spirit and truth? Hopefully, I covered that. It's beyond the physical. It's beyond the way we want to process it mentally. Okay, the brain is good and it will help you get there, but sometimes it gets in the way. There is a way to surrender. I can use meditation because Jesus even said, when you go to pray, go to a quiet place, go into the closet in the house and close the door. Can I, get the noise down. So, because the essence of prayer is to listen, and it's slotha. We talked about it last week. To set a trap for this universe, to Allah's thought, to the universal thought, to the universal rhythm, then you're in a different state of receiving, not broadcasting. And when you start receiving you're receiving the truth, and you'll know like, oh, I got this thought about maybe moving, or maybe reaching out to somebody I haven't reached out to, or there's so many, like making it this tweak in my life. You start getting these really good, positive, motivating, soothing thoughts if you open yourself up to it. And in truth, is because you're not introducing your own biases, your own. And it's like, yeah, that's why Jesus could get to reach a point where he says, "Love your enemy." It came to him. I mean, that this was a revelation that he felt, "Oh my God, this is how we nip all these global problems." And societal problems, and at a small scale problems. If I start loving my enemy, if I have no enemy, and I walk down the street, I am safe. And pretty soon I'm loved. And if somebody wants to hurt me, it's their baggage, it's not mine. So and then if you're afraid to die from anything, especially if you confront somebody powerful, um, then you're always kind of feeling like I'm not living my whole truth, because there's this fear that's gripping me back. So if you let go of that fear, then you can speak freely. You can speak the truth. That we see that in the prophets when the kings called them, and they were brilliant. They did, they were not stupid enough sometimes to just kind of blah and then have their head chopped off. John did. John the Baptist, he did. He spoke out freely. He spoke the truth. He told the king, "You're doing a bad thing with the wife of your brother." And to a point where the king said, "Yeah, first it's a little noise, a little noise, a little noise," but then it picked up momentum, and people were starting to kind of, talk about that. Okay, I'm gonna go nip it, and then he chopped his head. So that's why spirit and truth it empowers you. It gives you the ability to receive all of that, and then live, be able to have the capacity to say, okay, I know that now I can go tell the person who's doing a bad thing, but in a kind way, in a constructive way, to get them out of doing the badness, not in a confrontational way. And yet, if there is a backlash, I accept that, because I am not afraid. So imagine if we lived with no fear. And I think I did a whole talk about, Jesus basically was the poster child for the sticker that we see sometimes on cars and bumper stickers of no fear. He lived with no fear, especially when the time came for him to die for the belief system, for all these things that he's giving us. He walked into it, and then he confronted it in a way, but in a kind way. It's like, you say that about me. I am not saying that. I don't want your seat. I don't want to overthrow the Roman government. Because he knows all that is temporary. You overthrow the Roman government, some other government is going to come and say, okay, now we own this place. Or your own people might throw you out and replace you. We see that happening to this day in governments and revolutions and so forth. So he knew we need to function at a different space, and that's the space of spirit, of ruha and truth. Okay, we've got time. I think you just answered my second question. Oh, sorry, I should have read that one before. You've been wondering about this. Thank you. More. Okay, this is the last question. Are you saying Alaha does this mean God? Aramaic? Yes, absolutely. That is so. So the terms that are used biblically, Allah was the time of Jesus. That's the Aramaic term for what we say God. The Ithya Rabba is like an essence that talks about that this fantastic, amazing power that creates the universe, which is Allah. And the Hebrews used Elohim, and at some point they were even so afraid to say it that we get terms like Jehovah, and so people started using, because it's such a powerful um, concept that, and as I said, words have a very hard time describing that presence, that they started even hiding it. And you see that even in the writings when I said Matthew is very Jewish writing because of the time, because of the way it's written, versus Mark, you see in Matthew referring to the kingdom of heaven, Malkuta Dashmaya, versus in Mark, you see Malkuta Dallaha, the kingdom of God. So that tells you right there that the thought process of the writers, of the people who compiled the books, comes from a different set of belief systems that even though Jesus used both terms, that the king, most of the time he just said the kingdom, but it's they knew it's God's sovereign presence. If we are all in the realm of God, there are no borders, there are no colors, there are no nationalities and passports. And that's why I like using Alaha, Alaha is the Aramaic. If you see this, I know it's kind of fuzzy, but that's the Yahweh. That's one of the names that are used also to describe this presence. So when you pray, if you pray Allah, the Awa, if you want to follow Jesus in the Lord's Prayer, but again, if Awa is a trigger word, change it. It's beloved. It's the one who cares about you, who would do anything to make sure that you're fed and warm and loved and in peace and it's safe. That's the Allah that Yeshua Mashiach was talking about. That's the presence that he was trying to invoke and provoke in all of us. He wanted us to feel that because it's an energy that is, it's not a subtle energy, and you feel powered by it. And you can bring it to every place, and it changes that place. You can bring it to your meetings, your office, your supermarket, your laundromat, wherever you go. If you have that spirit and truth just boiling in you all the time, and a smile on your face, and a look that comforts people, that's the kingdom. Then you are in it. And when you're in it, I hope you get addicted to it, because there is no feeling better than that. And then you have no fear. You have absolutely you're not afraid that you're going to lose your job. You're not afraid you're going to run out of money. You're not afraid that you're going to lose your house. You're not afraid, that you're going to get hurt. It's kind of like watch kids when you put them on a soccer field or a basketball court, how they run with all their energy, all their being, all their focus. You take life that way. As you get older, like I did, in my 50s playing soccer, I'm like, oh, it's gonna hit me. Oh, but I can't afford a broken this, a broken that, a sprained this. But when I was a kid, I did not think about anything other than being all in. So be all in on life and bring the kingdom to yourself, to your community, and to the rest of this year and the rest of your life. And with that, I'm going to say thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your contributions. Don't forget that Dr. Eriko is here next week, and don't forget to watch for these daily lights, flashes of light from the Aramaic language. They'll be coming your way soon in short format. So thank you so much, and until next week, take care.